Yo gamers, what is good? We got a lot to get through today, including a retrospective look at 2018 for the Nintendo Switch, as well as a review for the Mario Kart World Nintendo Direct, which just went live today. So you're going to want to catch this episode, and we'll just get right into it now. We are going to dive in to 2018. Year 2, are we going to get the sophomore hijinks, or will Nintendo be able to stick the landing, following up one of, if not the best years they've ever had? I'm joined by an awesome guest, James, the man himself. Hey, we start our year in March with Kirby Star Allies. Ooh, James, did you ever play this game?
No, I didn't, but I guess the general sentiment I would say is that it was yet another Kirby title, not necessarily a new leap forward in gameplay.
That is what they should have put on the back of the box. It's another Kirby. Maybe things will all be redeemed in April when we got Nintendo Labo.
It kind of brought me back to Legos a little bit. Experiment is a good word. It was pretty fun to experiment with the piano is what we did, but I'm sure the other ones were fun to engineer, but I don't think it really sticked a long time after that point, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. Like, it was something that, it's interesting. I feel like the game was more in the making rather than what came after. The actually building of these pieces of cardboard into these crazy contraptions was kind of mind-boggling. You know, we start with like just a piece of cardboard, and by the end of it, we're jamming out. We're throwing the blues down on a freaking, you know, tiny like 8-key piano and stuff. Anyways, let's just get the freak away from Labo and forget that ever happened. James, did you ever play Tropical Freeze on the Wii U or Switch?
I played it once on the Switch, and I mean, new funky mode.
Yes.
That's all you can say.
On the Wii U, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze sold just over 1 million units, where on the Nintendo Switch, if I'm recalling correctly, it was somewhere around 3 million. Do you think that's indicative then of these games' sales capacity, or do you think that online discourse really impacted newcomers?
I think it does a lot, actually. So, I would actually say that the top 2 sellers, which at this point were Mario Odyssey and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild,
right,
were so highly praised online that they actually drove people to buy a Switch in the first place, right? I don't think Donkey Kong, first of all, is ever going to make somebody buy a Switch.
Right.
But not only that, just the fact that there was some like negative sentiment about the Wii U re-releases just brought down their numbers even for people who already had the Switch. I do think, at least as far as you're saying, sentiment shouldn't be ignored here. At this point in time, and I think even for a lot of this year, 2018, this 35 million units that we eventually reach at the end of the year of selling Switches, I think most of those people are going to be getting Mario or Zelda, probably not many other games. For sure, we will see like a few more copies being sold, or a few more times of copies being sold of Donkey Kong than previously on the Wii U, but certainly nothing special, I think.
We'll move on to Mario Tennis Aces now. James, do you like the Mario sports games?
I do, yeah. I really like the games. I'm constantly asking myself, is it worth the full $60, right?
Yes. Yeah, so you touch on something I actually want to kind of open up maybe into a bit of a bigger discussion, but really quick before that, my quick thoughts. I actually think that of all the Mario sports games on Switch, Tennis Aces is by far the best one. Unfortunately, we would see diminishing returns with these games, or they would just have less content at launch. But I think with Tennis Aces, not only did they really expand upon the basic tennis gameplay, it was like very anime, like you could slow down time and like, you know, hit the tennis ball, and then the other person could slow down time to hit it back. Right. And they did have a lot of cool things like challenges and the story mode and online. So I liked Mario Tennis Aces, but I will say, you talked about the full $60 price point, and I've actually been thinking a lot about Nintendo's pricing of software. Nintendo is interesting. They will sell a game like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey or Smash Ultimate for $60, but then they'll sell Mario Tennis Aces for $60. And I think that like, if we are trying to be fair here and say that like, try to understand all the things that go into making a game and, you know, understanding value and all that stuff, then like, I would actually say, if anything, it would make more sense for a game like Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, or Ultimate to be like $70 or $80, and then Tennis Aces to be like a $40 game. Like, It feels like Nintendo employs this strategy of like, we're just gonna price everything at 60, even though some of these games have value far surpassing maybe what $60 is. I mean, think about it. We get hundreds of hours out of Breath of the Wild, and it's not just like mindless hours. Those are like premium entertainment hours. Same with like Odyssey, or, you know, even a game like Splatoon 2 with the online multiplayer. You play it for hundreds of hours, but then like you get to Tennis Aces, and it's like, I mean, it's fun, but like, are we truly believing that that is of the same monetary value?
I definitely think it's for sure a strategy. If you say that every single experience that you create is $60, and you just get customers to expect that, right?
Right.
Then you will basically be able to, of course, there are some titles that probably cost you a lot more than the others, right? I can think of Zelda. Being a really long development cycle, right?
Right.
I'm not sure about Mario Odyssey, but it's certainly a high value game. I guess there are really a few different ways we can take this. We can either assume that $60 was not enough for Zelda or Mario, or it's too much for
like Tennis Aces or like Kirby.
Like that. It kind of gets an expectation going where if you're a customer of Nintendo, you assume that you're going to be paying $60 every time, and so you kind of are almost developing a habit in your customers such that you can expect $60 for a new game. That's only really beneficial for the company if the $60 is usually enough to pay for the game, and usually more than enough to pay for the game. Maybe they are subsidizing more expensive games by getting purchases of cheaper games at $60.
That is what, yes, and I actually think, what if the inverse is true? Because it's fascinating. Of all the big dogs in the gaming industry, who else besides Nintendo is out here 1 month releasing Tears of the Kingdom, the next month bringing back Famicom Detective Club, a 30-year-old visual novel NES game for a new entry that, like, you know full well that's not going to sell a ton. Like, that's definitely going to be a very niche thing. Yet they still, you know, they made a great game. They worked hard on that. Like, I feel like it could also be, in addition to subsidizing the more expensive games, the cheaper ones, it could also be we can make these cheaper or like these smaller, more niche games with the maybe surplus gains we get on a Breath of the Wild or something, right? Something that was interesting to me, that the first time I visited Japan, I was at a game store, and I noticed that unlike America, not every game was sold for like a flat equivalent to $60. I actually noticed that there seemed to be some price scaling going on. For example, JRPGs tended to be more in like the $70 range, but then like a game like the Link's Awakening remake, right, was like $40 or something.
That's
interesting. And I thought that was really interesting, and I saw this in a lot of different stores, and I was thinking, I wonder if in Japan they've had this for years now of like basically price scaling, but that's just something that hasn't really made its way across the sea.
I am not sure how committed they are to it. We don't see many below $60 releases, but to some extent they are committed to it because I think the landscape is shifting a little bit. I guess the older AAA model, we are seeing a whole lot of indie releases. And indie releases have to price according to the value they deliver with their game because they don't have the resources to create a console or create an entire brand name, right?
Right.
So the indie releases, which are really big on Switch, right? Kind of bring this whole dynamic of valuing by the title you're getting rather than the overall brand experience.
I will say, and obviously with a username like Jackson Loves Nintendo, you can expect just the most unbiased and perfectly nuanced takes from me. But one thing I will bring up that I don't see a lot of people say is 1-2 Switch, the kind of technical system showcase game at the launch of the Switch, kind of showing off the different unique hardware functions. Not a pack-in, $50. That's kind of crazy. It sold over 4 million units though, so like we're crazier as the consumers, but I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Switch 2, Welcome Tour. This is their new equivalent of it. If anyone goes and watches that treehouse footage, like, and you're watching in good faith, it is far more substantial as like a game and like interesting than 1-2 Switch was. $10. That is like, I think that's an example of like, hey, they are charging significantly less for this kind of like, you know, what most people in the kind of angry camp would want to be a pack-in game. They are charging that for way less than they did with the Switch 1. So I do think that like that's something that has been kind of overlooked in the discourse online. They want people to think of the brand and buy into the brand more than anything else, maybe. And it is interesting, like you said, with like the varying prices, because I guess we're kind of seeing maybe there will be some of that in this Switch 2 area. But anyways, do you have any other thoughts on this before we move back into 2018?
No, I mean, what we saw with Aces was a little bit of just like consumers fighting back a little bit,
right.
Like we were going into great depth about, just because of the price tag didn't seem to measure up to the value consumers thought they were getting.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Octopath Traveler. Now, this game I was so excited for because it was being brought to us from the studio behind Bravely Default, which is basically the best game ever made. So I was extremely not biased at all. So I was extremely excited to see what they were doing next. I was digging the HD 2D graphic style they were pioneering with this game. It looked like a very cool blend of, you know, modern lighting and particle effects with like very crisp and clean pixel work. So I loved that. The music sounded banging from the demos. I played the game and I liked it, but some people didn't like this game very much. Maybe less because of the actual content, but more like the execution. But James, what were your thoughts about Octopath?
Yeah, so I was playing the demo. Mm-hmm. I was into it. And I was like, yep, this is a must purchase.
Yeah.
And then almost tragically, I saw on release day that there was a lot of disappointment about the story and the characters and how they didn't all tie together.
Right.
And I guess me being like a very avid JRPG enthusiast wanted the overarching story.
Right.
And so I held off on the purchase.
All right, we're going to rapid fire a few of these. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Hot take, I like this more than Super Mario 3D World and Super Mario 3D Land and Super Mario Sunshine. Yes, I said it. I know. Crazy.
That is a hot take.
But you know what? Honestly, this game captures the Galaxy vibe more than any other 3D Mario, which is weird. I know that, like, so if you're looking for a Galaxy 3, I actually feel like Captain Toad is like kind of a good spot to go to because it all takes place in these little diorama, these kind of like planetoid areas with like really unique themings, you know, light boxes, sky boxes. I'm not a programmer. And like really unique like visual aesthetics and all this stuff in like the music and just, I don't know. I can't quite describe it other than it gives me the closest thing to a Galaxy feeling that any other Mario game has.
That's
really
interesting, actually. Like, generally, I've just heard underwhelming. I guess it warrants a second look then.
I like this game a lot. Only $40. Sometimes it goes on sale for cheaper. So I would recommend this. I think it's great quality. Okay, Labo. I can't even read what this says. Vehicle kit, I think. I didn't get this one. I don't care. Do you have any thoughts on this, James?
Not much different than what we previously said about Labo, except maybe even less impressive because Labo had been around already.
Super Mario Party. Wait, have you played any Mario Party games before Super Mario Party? Is my first question.
I had, yes.
Okay.
Wii Mario Party 8.
Okay, yeah. Mario Party 8. Had you played any of the N64 or GameCube ones?
Well, I think I had seen some. If we're talking about like in 2018. Me in 2018.
Yeah, right. Okay, and then last like prerequisite question, I guess. Had you played Mario Party 9 or 10?
No.
Okay. Mario Party went through like a fairly depressing decade. I would say honestly, I hate to say this, but I think Mario Party 8, your beloved Mario Party 8 that you played on the Wii, was kind of the start of that. It wasn't as bad, but it got a lot worse with 9.
Me having not had a whole lot of experience with Mario Party, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah.
Thought it was good. I couldn't say whether it scratch the itch of old
Right.
Mario Party gamers, right?
Right.
Just from my perspective, it was like a really solid release, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought that this was, for the first time in what felt like the longest nightmare of my life, there was actually hope. I thought it was pretty good. The mini games were solid. The presentation was very clean, actually. Like, do you remember the meat mini game where you're cooking the meat? And the meat was like crazy realistic for some reason. It was like, what the heck? It was like a 10 gigabyte game, 9 gigabytes went to the meat. The programming used to be like the nicest piece of meat ever. I thought it was great, and there was a ton of variety, ton of different modes they had. The boards, look, we got the gameplay back, that was good. The boards were a little bit weak though. They were all very grid-based, like kind of Minecraft-y looking. They weren't bad, but it wasn't like, I can't in all authenticity say that it was like fully what we wanted yet. But luckily, unlike the Mario sports games, which progressively got worse, Mario Party only got better. Like this was a series that absolutely dominated on the Switch.
Yep.
Yeah, so I liked it. That's all I have to say. It was great. James, what are your thoughts on the Pokemon Company remaking Gen 1 again for their first home console video game?
Let's go Eevee, let's go Pikachu. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I can't say it was all bad, but it wasn't all good.
Yes. I don't know how to say this other than this is my junk food game. Like, I can just turn my brain off and just, like, I don't have to think. I'm so OP. Like, you level up way too fast in this game. And you know what? Say what you will about, like, the catching in this, how you have to, like, throw the Pokeball. I have to be honest, I actually thought it was kind of a cool twist from normal trainer battles. But what I really, like, unapologetically loved in this game that I really want them to bring back, local co-op. You could play this with 2 people. That's so awesome. Like, we can both run around. But the funniest thing about this, though, is they didn't bother to rebalance the game if you had 2 people. So, like, literally, you would both have, like, level 30s fighting a 15. And you would kill everybody. And it was freaking hilarious. But that's kind of what I mean when I say it's like a junk food game. It's like, you're not really, you know, I'm not getting invested in the world or the story. It's Gen 1 again. Let's get to the big one of the year. So up until this point, James, how are we feeling about 2018? Has it been a good year?
It was underwhelming. It was certainly like, you couldn't say that there were no notable title releases, but you couldn't say there were any like blockbuster smashes or the equivalent for
that
Nintendo.
foreshadowing? Blockbuster smashes? Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I agree. It's been a year full of Wii U remasters and weird cardboard experiments and some pretty underwhelming original titles like Kirby or Sushi Strikers. You know, there were some good ones here and there. The second half, you know, had Octopath and Super Mario Party. But yeah, not great, especially when we just came from 2017. Some pretty strong whiplash. But then it was all worth it because that fateful December 7th day, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, baby! We finally got it. James, what was your feeling holding Smash in your hands?
Well, unfortunately I didn't get the physical release, so
okay.
I wasn't holding it in my hands,
digitally caressing it.
Yes, with my digital
hands.
hands.
Digital hands.
Well, I have to say it was like immediately rewarding just to open it up and see how much justice they had done to my favorite game.
Dude, yes.
It was like no complaints. I was happy with every direction they took it, even though some people weren't as happy. Maybe the more competitive side initially had some hesitations about it, but I was all in. I was loving it. I loved how they made it more fast-paced. Like they brought back a little more movement options and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, everybody was anticipating this game. And like, I don't know, there were no like major criticisms of the game on its release, so everybody hyping it up and then just seeing it pay off, like everybody was happy with that, which was awesome.
It was so awesome. Like, how can we ever forget the day they announced this in that Direct? And like, you know, it's funny, around that time, Smash was kind of in the zeitgeist because, okay, look, for all the youngins watching this, back in the day, not just anything could be a meme, right? Like, it actually took a little bit of effort, and, you know, you really had to, like, convince quite a lot of people to get into it. Smash was kind of a meme at the time. I remember, like, people would create these, like, kind of fake character introduction videos with, like, the Smash Brothers Brawl song going in the background. And, like, that was, so it was already, like, kind of big. And then they, like, hit you with that iconic reveal trailer with, like, the Smash Ball on fire. Everyone's like, holy frick! Like, is this real? We're all going crazy. And then, like, in that E3, when we see everybody is here, like, no cuts, and the game looks awesome, and it's just like, holy crap! Like, Sakurai! He's going crazy in the studio. And it cuts out, and just like James said, like, the expectations and hype were, like, through the roof for this game, and somehow it, like, even met, and I feel like in some ways exceeded those. It was so good. I feel like, honestly, in terms of core Smash gameplay, this has got to be, like, the uncontested best one, right? Like, is there really anything that other games do better? Well, okay,
if you talk to a
Melee
fan, they might be raising.
They might be raising some.
But I think, well, let me put it this way. I don't know how you could release a follow-up to Smash Ultimate, and I think that's the highest praise a game can get. So, really, I don't know what else to say about it.
They did it. I know. They peaked.
We do have.
Yeah, we have one
Super
last
Mario
one.
Bros.
So we started this list with an underwhelming 2D platformer, and that's actually also what we're ending it with. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe spits in the name of the Deluxe moniker that I had thought would be such a strong kind of signal to the fans that whenever they re-released the game with this, it was gonna just have tons of new stuff, totally warrant the double dipping. No! They spent more time on this game's box art renders than anything else. It's literally just New Super Mario Bros. U and New Super Luigi U. Like, brother, that sucks. Like, come on, at least like add in a new world or add in like some sort of crazy new multiplayer mode. If not, just bringing back like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, DS, and 2 and putting them all in one or something. Is $60 also. We want to talk about games not worth $60. Frick this game. They would go on to make Mario Wonder for $60. Anyone who looks me in the face and buys Mario U after Mario Wonder came out, bro, get the freak out of here. I'm about to slap you. I'm gonna tell you go back in that GameStop and get a refund. That's crazy. Overall thoughts on 2018? If you are new to the Nintendo scene with the Switch era, you would be forgiven for thinking it was like a pretty good year. If you've been with Nintendo for a while, if Smash wasn't this year, that would have been a rough year.
Yeah. I think this is like a strategy Nintendo employs, not necessarily on the year time scale, but given a really strong release, they'll let it cool off for a little bit.
Yeah, right.
This is like not just for 2017, but in the context of 2018, right?
Right.
2017 was a really strong year.
Right.
And ended off the year with Mario Odyssey, right?
Right.
So everybody was hyping it up. And so then they I think that is kind of their time at least, or at least what they like to use for putting in some of the weaker titles or more niche titles,
right.
just to try to get some variety and I don't know, take some chances, right? So I can understand like having a weaker year here. I don't think it really lowered spirits at all for Switch gamers. Like they were still looking forward. Mario or Smash Bros. Just brought hype even higher.
It carried the whole year for anyone who was critical of the re-releases. Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, closing off the year, I think Switch was. You can say at least they were as strong as the previous year.
Oh yeah.
If not, even stronger because of anticipation for future titles that were being announced, right? So
okay, well, with that said, that's going to wrap up the segment on the Switch 2018 reflection. Thank you so much, James, for joining.
Thank you.
Yo gamers, what is good? Today Nintendo aired a Nintendo Direct focused on Mario Kart World. This is the first game-specific Direct of the Nintendo Switch 2 era, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on this presentation. So, it was about 15 minutes long, and for a lot of people on the internet, I think there was this anticipation of some big hook that would sway those who are not yet convinced by the bold $80 pricing Nintendo has opted to give this game, and I guess like kind of convince them to purchase it. Now, for me personally, I've already been convinced that this game is worth $80 based on what we've seen, so I didn't necessarily have the entire purchase on the line here. I was more so just interested to see what else Nintendo might have to show us in this game. So I guess I can't really speak from a place of did this game convince me it was worth the money or not, and I guess honestly nobody really can yet because nobody owns the game. So instead, I'm just going to be focusing on the actual content of the Direct and just on the game more so than any external factors. My shotgun reaction from the Direct was, well, that was a little underwhelming. The first 7 minutes, which is also the first half of the presentation, was essentially recycling information that we had learned during the April 2nd Nintendo Direct as well as the following Nintendo Treehouse shows. It was the second half of the presentation that got a lot more interesting for me because that's when Nintendo began to dive into actual new features of this game, including a pretty decent amount of new modes. So to just list some of these off, we got the official confirmation of battle mode returning. This was something you actually could have seen in some of the menus in Treehouse footage, but this was the first time we saw it in action. It looks like they're just sticking with balloon battle and coin runners for this game, which does make it a bit less from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, so that's kind of a shame. But on the plus side, they're either remixing or introducing battle mode exclusive stages, which is pretty cool. And I guess at the end of the day, most people play Mario Kart for the racing anyway, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay, another returning mode is Versus, and this has to be the most robust that this mode has ever been in the series history. First off, this is where you're going to find the classic 3-loop lap progression that older Mario Kart games had, so rest assured you can still do that if you would like in this game, and that kind of confirms my theory I had earlier where every track has 2 variants. Of course, one being for the open world version and the other being for the 3-loop lap version. So that's really cool. But I gotta say, the other thing about Versus mode that is very interesting and looks super fun to me is how you can essentially create your own custom cups in this mode. It's not exactly a cup, but you can choose a route to race on that includes multiple different tracks in the game, and it doesn't have to strictly adhere to one of the Grand Prix Cups or the Knockout Rally Cups. So I could say I want to go to Peach Beach, then the Great Question Block Ruins, then Bowser Castle, or whatever. You can go anywhere, and from my understanding, it's not even limited to just the surrounding courses, so you could really make a cross-country marathon here, and this might be how we get the All-Star Cup from Double Dash to return, because you could essentially plot out a route that goes across the entire world, hitting every single course. That actually sounds super fun to me, especially if you got like a weekend or a Friday night with a ton of hours to burn with friends. This could be a really fun thing to get into. They also talked a little bit about team racing, and it seems like it's basically just the same as normal, but you can now do 3 or 4 teams, so that's cool. There was also some updates on various game mechanics. So we now know that dash food basically gives you a little boost and unlocks outfits. There's multiple new movement options in the game, including the charge jump, where you basically drift without turning to get a little jump, which looks awesome. Then you could string that into another new movement option, the rail grinding technique. And from there, you can jump onto the wall to kind of ride along the wall for a little bit. It was crazy looking, and honestly, I feel like this game will have a much higher skill ceiling than any previous entry just because of how dynamic these moves are. These are the types of additions that might not seem that crazy on the surface, but once you get into them and truly master the depth that they offer, it's going to make the previous Mario Kart games feel archaic and very stiff in comparison. It truly is a new chapter and a new step for the Mario Kart series as a whole. Okay, but there was one other pretty massive addition that they focused on, but only a little bit during this presentation. Well, I guess outside of the Nintendo Switch 2 face cam support, but that was building off of free roam. Now, we had seen free roam before, and you know, it looked cool. It was nice that you can drive around just chilling and hang out with friends, and there was a cool photo mode. That's all great. But I think a lot of people were wondering, is there more? And it turns out that there is, because this is essentially Nintendo's way of bringing back the challenge mode from the DS games, which I and many other people predicted. It is really awesome, and I think that frankly, the biggest crime of this Direct was just not hyping that up more, because this could be a really big selling point. They only showed off like 2 different challenges for a total of 10 seconds, when I feel like you could have made an entire 1 to 2 minute trailer just giving us a montage of all sorts of different ones that would have really captured the excitement of people. But I guess at the same time, that also does leave some mystery in the air, which is also enticing in and of itself. But yeah, this is crazy. Essentially, you go around the world, you can find P switches, which once you press them, they will add some sort of challenge in front of you. And I was surprised because it works very similar to the 3D Mario games. Think of how in Super Mario Odyssey you would occasionally find P switches to press, and then they would add some new terrain or blocks or something that you'd have to complete in an obstacle course fashion to get the moon. That's sort of the same deal here, and I love that. And there's something that I don't know how many people caught, but in the narration, the commentator states that there are hundreds of these challenges. Yes, hundreds as in not singular, but plural. That is huge. That is so awesome. The fact that there could be potentially upwards of 2, 3, 4, maybe even 500 of these things lying around the world is a big deal. That is way more than the DS version, which I believe had about 63, and even then there was a good chunk of those that were repeats. Now obviously I'm expecting there to be a lot of repeats in this game's challenges as well, but I mean still, with that many, that is a substantial single player offering that no other Mario Kart game has seen before. I just feel like they underplayed it so much when this could have been a bigger deal, and it's fine as is. I wasn't disappointed by its implementation. It looks very clean, gets you right into the challenge. It looks fun, and I don't know, I just feel like that was kind of weird they didn't hype that up more. I'm like, bro, take confidence in that. That's like the biggest thing people wanted out of a new Mario Kart. But yeah, that was definitely for me, and I think a lot of other people, the most interesting bit of new information we got. Other than that though, it was mostly just like we got a handful of new carts, we got a handful of new songs. Surprisingly, no new characters or courses or even items announced in this presentation. So yeah, perhaps Nintendo blew their load a little bit early, and they already showed us everything. I guess with the courses, it's a little misleading to say there are only 32 in this game, which by the way, that is the standard that most Mario Kart games, at least all of them since DS with the exception of 8 Deluxe, launched with. But because you have to consider there's all the intermission routes that you can go on, as well as just all the other off-roading areas. So really the amount of rideable road or terrain in this game is probably like a lot closer to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the booster course than we are even anticipating. But anyways, I guess my biggest surprise was just that there's not really any new items besides the 3 we had already seen, and there's like no more characters seemingly. I mean, come on man, I was hoping there would at least be a few Mario Odyssey reps, but seemingly we've seen all of them, and I have to say, this is still a freaking incredible roster we got here. Definitely the most fun and just like truly bizarre roster of characters we've ever seen. Not just in a Mario Kart game, but I would say just a Mario game in general. So I am super happy with it. I guess I was just a little bit hopeful we would see like a new Donker or a few Mario Odyssey enemies, because I love that game, and it's kind of a bummer that seemingly no Mario spin-off games are going to be sourcing enemies or NPCs from Super Mario Odyssey. I'm also pretty surprised about the lack of new items. I mean, we got the Food Dash or Dash Food. That is basically just a fancier version of a mushroom, but it can give you a new outfit. Then we have the Coin Shell, which is like, I guess that's cool, but apparently Mario Wiki is saying this already appeared in Mario Kart Arcade GP. I guess they function a little bit differently, but even that's like, okay, so we've already gotten that. And then there's like Kamek, which, it's kind of funny that, Kamek had this long history of not being in Mario Kart. He finally gets in with the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course DLC, and then right away in this next one, they cut him again. So, RIP Kamek fans, but it does look like a really cool item that is very dynamic and changes a lot depending on where you are, the surrounding environment, or the enemies or the objects. So it looks like a very technically impressive item, and something that, is kind of like you could only do on new hardware. But yeah, I guess we really have seen all the new items and all of the new characters. So, okay, concluding thoughts on the entire Direct. Oh, I forgot, there's also a rewind feature, but it's only available in single player mode offline. So, cool, I guess. It feels like a very bizarre inclusion, but I guess it's cool if you're trying to practice tricks. this Direct, I think, was solid for people who are maybe not as plugged into every single update on the Nintendo scene. If you show this to casual Nintendo fans or just casual game enjoyers, I think they'd actually be very impressed with it. But to the people who have been following this game and every single update that comes out about it on X or on YouTube, there really wasn't a ton of new things shown off. I mean, there was, but like even most of the things they did announce here, people have sort of pieced together might already be in the game before this. So yeah, I don't really think that's Nintendo's fault. I think that's just like kind of the byproduct of having a bunch of autistic freaks that like your games, that look at everything. So anyways, Mario Kart World looks freaking awesome. I'm still super jazzed for this game. And honestly, the more I've thought about that free roam and all of those challenges, it just gets even more attractive to me. And I cannot wait to play this game on June 5th. It'll be interesting to see if there's any other last secrets they're holding out on us besides Rainbow Road. But other than that, it seems like we pretty much know everything about the game now. I was also a little surprised no mention of online tournaments or Mario Kart TV replays. It seems like those are both gone. Koopa Kids are gone. Let's rejoice. I'm actually so down to have them banished for a generation or two. They were just showing up way too much in the Wii U era, so I am okay with that. But anyways, with that said, that's going to wrap up this portion of the Nintendo Switch 2 Hype podcast where I kind of go over the news. And yeah, I guess we're just waiting on the pre-orders now, and then we'll be able to play this thing. But thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later.